Grazie a Klaus Raff e adesso la parola al professor Roberto Papa, capo del Consiglio di ricerca e sperimentazione in agricoltura di Foggia. Prego.
Good evening, everybody. Good evening, Mr. Chairman. And I am the director of a cereal research center that is working mainly on durum wheat, but I am also working on genetic resources and biodiversity conservation, as every plant breeders do. I want to focus my talk on the heterogeneous varieties because sometimes I feel that there is some misunderstanding on this concept. When we are talking about heterogeneous varieties, we are talking about basically two cases. One case is the case of land races, so local varieties that are reproduced by farmers without the intervention of plant breeding. Then a similar thing, but is made up by plant breeders or in any case by farmers, you can produce a cross among different varieties and produce a kind of artificial land race by pooling together all these hybrids that derive from the cross between the different varieties. And this is a way of conserving diversity, or as well of develop new varieties in conventional plant breedings. But the focus of the approach of both landrace conservation and evolutionary plant breeding is the concept of dynamic conservation that is able to maintain evolutionary potential and focus on adaptation of the materials to the environment and to the human needs. This is an example of a composite cross of durum wheat that is made up by pooling different F1, different hybrids obtained by different crosses. And in this way, we have a program with organic farmers to develop new varieties for organic farming, but basically conventional varieties developed by selecting this type of populations. The management of these materials can be more or less complex. This is an example that has come up from a colleague of mine from Montpellier in CRA. And then the other point is that what we are talking about when we say adaptation. This is a work that we have done in Ethiopia on barley landraces from Ethiopia. And as you see, we are spanning from 1,798 meters above sea level till about 3,500. So a huge gradient in terms of altitude. And as you see, the genetic composition, these are the genotypes, not the genotypes, sorry, the genetic clusters, the genetic groups that are shown in different colors. The genetic composition of these materials over this gradient of altitude drastically change, gradually change. This is a clear sign of the adaptation. That's why this approach of evolutionary plant breeding is very interesting, because it's promoting adaptation to environment. It's not only in Ethiopia that we have land races, but we have also in Italy, as in tomato, for instance, or in Europe for maize. So we have to consider that this is a very valuable source of genetic variation and potential for adaptation. Then, of course, we can these land races are distinguished by the farmers in a way. They give names to them, maybe for the color of the kernels, for the color of the spike, or for some specific characteristics. But the level of diversity that you have inside this population at farmer level, at the regional level, at country level, is huge. So this variety, these materials, is structured in the diversity that is between population, within population, so within the fields, between fields, across regions, and so on and so on. And so this type of structure has been seen by many authors using different tools. This is an example of a study that I've done in Sardinia on barley again. And then you see here a strong structure as in Ethiopia, parallel of Ethiopia, showing evidence of adaptation. But look here, the amount of genetic variation between population is only 14%. This means that 86% of the diversity that you can find overall Sardinia is within a single field. And if we want to measure this diversity, we can compare it with the varieties. The diversity that we have in Sardinia in land races is comparable with the all varieties of 2-row and 6-row barley, and the amount of diversity that you can find within a single field is comparable to the diversity, at least molecular level, of the diversity of 6-row barley varieties. And this is a main concept. So if we want to develop a system to distinguish land races from between them or between land races and other things, will be very complicated. I'm not saying it's impossible, but will be very complicated and in any case very expensive. But there is another point that is crucial and typical of land races. Land races are not sold by seed companies or by other people, but are grown by farmers year after year in their own farm. And this makes the potential for adaptation. Because if you think about of growing something in just one place, you will not have the ability to adapt these materials to a wide variation of environments. So you need that the farmers themselves, or whoever, maybe some other system, can be able to grow these materials within the farm. But then what's happened, if at a certain point we start to sell land races, we start to sell this type of heterogeneous varieties. And then we take one guy here and say, let's do it. Let's start to grow up land races and sell it to everybody in Sardinia. We lose a lot of diversity. So we have to think about carefully when we are thinking about this type of system, what we are doing when we make a change in the legislation. So I think that this aspect of the market can be important to help maybe some exchange between farmers, more or less, at the local level. But I think that could be a very serious complication if there is a kind of business out of there. So, in conclusion, I think that there are 3 points. The first is that dynamic conservation is important, and I think that is a source of diversity for plant breeding, can be also used in agriculture, even if we have to be careful that, for instance, in cereals, if you grow a heterogeneous population, at a certain point populations start to rise in height. And in a very short time, all the materials will lodge, so will fall at maturity, and you will have a serious problem of handling these materials if you are a farmer that wants to sell the kernels. So these materials can be seen as a way to develop new varieties, as a way to conserve the genetic diversity. I hardly see this material can be seen as a huge strategy to grow materials in the farm, so to produce the commodities. So I think that when we are talking about this story of the market, of the seed market of land races, we have to think about some different possible systems, like linking this possibility of exchange materials that is seen as a possibility in the legislation that is proposed here, if I read well the proposal. So it's possible to exchange freely the materials, but also should it be useful if some help is done for the farmers to exchange materials, maybe within a network of conservation. And then we have to be sure that the unambiguous identification of land races will not be feasible. And this is another problem that can be related to the fact that once you are in the market, maybe you will be pushed out to develop this type of system. So I've also gave a list of references, but there is another aspect that I would like to consider that is related to the agronomic value, the satisfactory value, the sustainable value, and the, let's say, cultivation value. Okay, I see that there is this change now in this proposal of the rapporteur from the first part, but I want just to ask you a question that maybe I don't see something that is very important to do otherwise. But why we have to keep the agronomic value of the varieties, and we just not rely on the fact that it's possible to have a dose, so something that is uniform, stable, and differentiated. So I think that the farmers nowadays grow up since the early days after the Second World War, and probably is able to choose between different varieties that are on the catalog. Of course, needs information. Need information on the value, of the agronomic value, and the quality value of the materials, but probably it doesn't need to be helped to avoid bad varieties. Thank you very much. And I'm done in a few minutes, a few seconds in advance.
20 seconds. Grazie a Roberto Papa. Adesso la parola a Thor Koefed, Chairman of WP Seed Copa Cogeca.